Welcome to the Kevin Davis Insurance Community Association Industry Directors and Officers Liability 2013 Claim Trends webinar. Our presenter today is Kevin Davis, the president of Kevin Davis Insurance, and my name is Sherry Branson. I'm your moderator. And if you have any questions regarding today's webinar and the topics that we're covering, please send an email to sbranson@kdins.com, and that's sbranson, B-R-A-N-S-O-N, @kdins.com. We're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of today's webinar to answer all of your questions. Welcome, Kevin.
How you doing, Sherry?
Good, good. How's everything going out in California?
Pretty good. Good afternoon here.
Yeah, good weather?
Yes, pretty good.
Oh, great. Well, I'm in Texas. I'm in Austin, Texas, and it's a little cloudy and cool here today, which is a nice break because we're probably going to have a hot summer, so I'm enjoying the cooler weather. And Kevin, I know you've been in the community association insurance industry for quite a while. Can you tell us how long you've been in the industry?
Sure, Sherry. I've been handling directors and officers liability insurance for community associations for over 30 years. My first D&O policy for Condominimum was in 1981, when there were only, a few thousand associations. Now there are over 300,000 associations across the United States, and guess what? We write over 30,000 associations. That's about 10% of the entire marketplace. This makes us one of the largest writers of this class of business in the country. However, today we're facing a major problem for community associations. There's been a significant rise in the number of D&O claims over the past several years, and I believe it's going to create a major problem for boards of directors for community associations.
Okay. So, Kevin, you're saying some of these claims were never a problem in the past?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. When I started D&O, claims for employment practices, breach of contract, and discrimination, they were really unheard of. Today we're seeing more and more employment-related claims, not to mention a large amount of breach of contract claims and claims for discrimination.
So I guess that's why there's a need for D&O insurance.
Yeah, that's why the D&O is important today more so than ever before. Basically what D&O insurance is peace of mind insurance. Community association board members have to make decisions. And when problem arises from unit owners or board members or renters or contractors or management company employees, when they don't like decisions the board has made, they file a claim against them. What D&O insurance does is funds the defense and pays judgment in the event there's a claim against them in the role of managing the affairs of the association.
Okay, so it sounds like the board has a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and that's one of the major issues today. It has a lot of responsibility. The association board of directors' job is to maintain, enhance, and protect the value of the community association. And they do this by collecting assessments. What's happened now is that the downturn in the economy has significantly impacted the community association's ability to collect these assessments. As a result, claims are on the rise because the boards don't collect them timely, employees are being laid off or terminated, and contracts are being canceled without cause.
Okay. And Kevin, can you tell us what changes are you seeing with the unit owners?
Well, see, the unit owners are now becoming more aware of themselves. They know their rights, and they know what they can do and what they can't do. They realize the board has what's called a fiduciary responsibility, and they can be held liable if they fail to live up to that responsibility. Unit owners are holding the board responsible for decisions they make or do not make.
Oh, okay. Now, that's a little confusing, I think. What do you mean by do not make?
Well, that's where the problem comes into play here, because boards of directors have to decide how they're going to run the association. And sometimes they turn their back or turn to a situation, instead of enforcing the documents, they refuse to. And what happened recently is that we had a board of directors who failed to enforce the documents that prohibited the ability to sell items out of their individual unit. And what the unit owner was doing was selling expensive jewelry. Well, guess what happened? They were robbed at gunpoint. But instead of them taking responsibility for the loss, guess what they did?
Don't tell me.
Yes. The unit owners, they sued the board of directors for failing to enforce the documents, stating that if the board would have enforced the documents, the robbery would not have occurred. And we're seeing more and more of these kind of claims more often, and I believe it's because the economy right now, is the downturn in the economy is really impacting these associations.
Mm-hmm. Now, Kevin, can you tell us what are the key considerations that people should consider when they're looking at directors and officers coverage?
Well, I understand this. First of all, there's no such thing as a standard D&O contract. So what you really need to look at is a couple of things. Number one, who's insured under the policy. Number two, what they're insured against, which is usually a wrongful act. And the third thing is what is a claim. So by looking at all three of those things right there, you get an idea of what the key things you need in order to look at a direct and officer's liability policy. Mm-hmm.
When you say insured, can you tell me who exactly is an insured in a D&O policy? Who would be the insured?
Okay. You first start up with the insured organization, which is the actual community association itself. You're talking about the past, present, any duly elected, appointed directors, trustee, employee, committee members, spouses, and a property manager. Now, the key terms here is number one is the entity itself, the organization, because most package policies exclude the actual entity itself, the community association, from coverage. It's important to pick up the past board members, employees, committee members, and all volunteers. And coverage must extend to the property manager.
Now, why is that so important, though, when you say board members and volunteers should be covered and the management company? Why is that so important?
Well, the key thing right now is that you have coverage for your current board of directors, which most policies do. But what happens that we see is that current board of directors don't like the way the reserves have been funded over the past 5 years. So instead of them having a special assessment to collect more, what they do is go back after the past board of directors and say, you should have collected more assessments to begin with, and therefore we're going to hold you responsible for the lack of adequate funding of the reserves. So that's why that past board members is important. The volunteers are important because you could have one individual whose job is to change the light bulbs in the common area. And all of a sudden that person forgets to change the light bulbs, and all of a sudden we have a situation where a person was harassed or molested in the common area, and that person came back and blamed the volunteer whose job was to change the light bulb. So what we're looking at here is coverage for volunteers, past board members, and you have to make sure the property manager is covered also, because the property manager is the messenger. They're the ones who are out there explaining to the unit owner that they can't put towels on the balcony, or they can't park wherever they want to park. And as a result, they get named in the lawsuit also, so they have to be covered under the policy.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And Kevin, you also mentioned wrongful act. Can you tell us what exactly is a wrongful act?
Well, a wrongful act basically is any error, misstatement, misleading statement, act, omission, neglect, all that stuff that's on there. But basically, all we're saying is this. A wrongful act is any act the insured can be held legally liable for. Often this comes in the area of conflict of interest, failure to abide by the governing documents, failure to properly handle elections, failure to enforce the rules, or failure to properly manage association finances.
Okay. And then now, can you define a claim? I think sometimes that can get a little confusing because there's so many different types of claims out there.
Yeah, that's why we have to define it, because historically, most people don't realize what a claim is. A claim is a written demand for monetary or non-monetary relief. It's also a civil proceeding commenced by the service of a suit or complaint, a criminal proceeding commenced by return of indictment, and a formal administrative regulatory proceeding. The key thing here is that a claim is a written demand for monetary or non-monetary relief. That's the important thing to remember. Non-monetary damage claims have been the #1 source of claims for community associations over my 30 years in this business. Fighting over the right to have a pet, fighting over a parking space, fighting over the right to hang a flag in your front yard is what we've always seen historically and what we continue to see. This coverage is really critical for community associations, and when you see a claim in this area, you have to put the carrier on notice. So if you get a letter addressed that says the board is failing to enforce the pool hours in a timely manner, then that is a claim, and you have to put us on notice.
Okay, that sounds extremely important. And now we're going to go into the area to discuss claim trends and what Kevin is seeing in the community association industry. The chart that you see on the screen has 10 claim categories. Kevin, can you tell us what are the changes that you see happening, what trends are out there right now?
Well, the key thing to look at here is you can see that 5 claims represent 78% of all of our claims that we see. 5 of them. And those are 5 we're going to be talking about in a little bit. The other ones are fast growing, and we're seeing a lot more claims in all these areas right now.
Okay. And now I see that breach of fiduciary duty appears to be the largest category. So can you give us an example of that?
Sure. The breach of fiduciary duty is the most common type of claim. And as I said, the board of directors has a fiduciary responsibility to act in the association's best interest. Whenever they fail to act in that way, they can be sued for breach of their fiduciary responsibilities. It happens usually when a unit owner believes that the board arrived in a decision that benefited a board member and is not in the best interest of the association. For example, the board has a strict no pet policy and forces Jennifer, owner of unit number 12, to get rid of her dog Max. Jennifer feels that the rule is unreasonable because Max is an emotional support pet, and she has a doctor's note. Jennifer files a claim against the board for breach of fiduciary duty because there are other dogs in the association and the board is not enforcing the rules uniformly. Defense costs only paid $22,000.
Now, when you say emotional support animals, what exactly is an emotional support animal?
Yeah, and we're seeing these things more and more, these claims for these emotional support animals. Although the association may have a very strict policy prohibiting pets, there are services out there where you can get a certificate that sits back and states that your dog or cat is important to you and you need it for emotional reason. We had a situation where a squirrel, that's right, a squirrel had a certificate that said he was basically an emotional support animal.
Squirrels, Kevin?
A squirrel.
Oh.
Yes. So, I mean, we definitely see all different kind of things under this breach of fiduciary duty. And one thing is that you have to understand, these kind of situations are the non-monetary damage claims we're talking about because they're not suffering economic loss here. They just want to have a right to have their squirrel or their dog or their cat. You know, when we talk about D&O claims, we're talking about emotionally based claims, not economic based claims. And, you know, most people are used to seeing economic based claims and they actually end up in thousands and thousands of dollars of costs. But on the D&O side for community associations, it's the same kind of craziness that you want to see over and over again about the pets, about the parking, and things like that. The breach of fiduciary duty is number 1.
Mm-hmm. And then number 2 is the violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions more commonly known as CC&Rs. Can you tell us what you're seeing in that area?
The CC&Rs are really the governing documents that sits back there and explains what you can do and what you can't do in your community association. It's very similar to breach of fiduciary duty claims, but it's more specific to the governing documents than the broad breach of fiduciary duty claims that we've been seeing. Remember, the board's job is to enforce the association rules. And when you try to enforce the association rules, people get upset. And when they get upset, what they do is constantly go and challenge the rules, saying that you don't have the authority, you don't have the right to sit back there and tell us what we can do and what we can't do in our community. For example, the association documents have restrictions regarding the color people can paint their homes. Bill, who lives in Unit 6, decides to paint his home brown. The association approves. Bill then changes his mind and decides to paint his house pink. But Bill refuses to notify the association of the change. The association notifies Bill that the color was not approved and he must change it. And guess what Bill does? He gets upset. He sues the association because he believes that some homes in the neighborhood are not up to the approved color list, and therefore he's being treated unfairly.
Interesting. And Now as we move on to the third most common claim that you're seeing, breach of contract, I do know that associations enter into contracts every day with a variety of vendors. So what's going on in that area, Kevin?
Well, this is the fastest growing area, and it's really a tough area because you have to understand, when you breach a contract, you're making a decision that's really intentional. And so historically, there never was coverage for breach of contract claims, and to this very day, you can't get 100% coverage. You can only get defense costs. So we're only going to defend breach of contract claims because if you can't, then boards of directors across the country will sit back there and just cancel all their contracts without cause. So the one thing is that it's defense costs only. A breach of contract claims occurs when a community association has an agreement and they refuse to honor it. As simple as that. And usually it has to do with an improvement or repair by the association. We're talking about painting contractors, roofers, elevator repair, cable, security, management company, employees, all that. Every time they enter into one of these contracts, they have to keep up with the contract. They cannot cancel it anytime they want to. Perfect example is what we had here. The association has a contract with ABC Landscaper Services. And Mr. Wilson, the board president, he's just not happy with the performance of ABC Landscaper. And he just terminates the contracts, and then he hires DF&G Landscaping Services. ABC Landscaper files a suit against the association for breach of contract seeking $150,000, which is the cost of the contract. However, we paid $15,000 only to defend the contract because, again, we only pay defense costs only.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And I did want to mention again that if you have any questions regarding what Kevin is talking about or any of the information we include in the webinar, please email me at sbranson, B-R-A-N-S-O-N, @kdins.com. Send me an email. We're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of today's session, so start thinking about your questions now and start emailing them so we can get to them when we get to the end. And now we move on to the fourth most common claim that we're seeing, which is discrimination. Kevin, can you tell us what that is and what types of discrimination you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about this kind of discrimination here, we're talking about non-employment related discrimination. This involves usually the Fair Housing Act or American Disabilities Act. Sometimes it involves selective enforcement or arbitrary enforcement of association documents. But mostly it regards stupidity. That's right, stupidity. I mean, for example, there was a board election. The current board president printed flyers accusing his rival, Mr. Chan, of questionable practices and made negative comments about his ethnicity. As a result, Mr. Chan lost the election and filed a suit against the president and the association accusing the president of discrimination. Now, it's a $3,000 claim, not a big claim, but again, it is discrimination type claim situation.
Okay. And now rounding out the top 5 is employment practices liability. What exactly is that, Kevin?
Okay. When we talk about employment practices, we're talking about the associations out there, the condominiums, co-ops that have employees. This includes wrongful termination, sexual harassment, and discrimination. Now, these claims are excluded under most D&O policies, so you have to make sure that those coverages are provided if you have employees. An example, association terminates Mr. Grant. He's a 72-year-old employee whose job was to maintain the front gate of the association, and he's been doing it for over 30 years. Mr. Grant is very popular and loved by the community. However, you get a new board of directors, and what they do is sit back there and they fire Mr. Grant and hires a young, good-looking individual that they all believe will make everyone feel safe to man the front gate. And guess what Mr. Grant does? He ends up suing the new board of directors for age discrimination.
Okay, now that covers employment practices liability. And now we move on to, in the chart that we had earlier in the webinar, we had 10 total claim categories. And now we're going to discuss the other categories that were on that chart. And now, Kevin, insured versus insured, can you tell us what exactly, where does that come into play?
And that comes into play in a claim I mentioned earlier where you have the new board of directors, or similar to Mr. Grant here. The new board of directors sit back there and says, you know what, we don't like Mr. Grant anymore. He's old. We want a young board. We want a young security guard. So what that new board can sit back there and do is go back after the old board, the old past president, and sit back and file a claim against him saying that the old past president should have gotten Mr. Grant, but he didn't do it because Mr. Grant is related to him or his grandfather. Now, what will happen then, you have that old board who get upset and says, you defamed me or you slandered me, and go after the new board. So having insurers insured coverage is critical to these D&Os because they're emotionally driven claims, and you will have a situation where the old board will sue the new board, and they'll counterclaim the new board versus the old board.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And now I would think with the economy the way it is, mismanagement of association funds, is that you're seeing that as a big problem right now?
Yeah, that's another area that's starting to grow. And mismanagement association fund is growing because you have theft of association funds by association board members, employees, management company, employees of the management company. I mean, we had a situation where one association lost $1 million because they received a $1 million check from the insurance company for repairs after a major hurricane several years ago. And what happens is that the president of the association goes to the bank to sit back there and make some repairs and find out there's no money left. The only asset they had at the time was a $1 million D&O policy. The crime policy did not apply because they only had a $50,000 limit and they couldn't prove who stole the money. So it came back under the D&O policy under mismanagement of association funds.
Wow. And then I would think also related to the economy would be foreclosures that are going on in various associations. Can you touch upon wrongful foreclosure?
Yeah, wrongful foreclosure is a problem because we haven't seen a lot of them in the past, but now we're seeing more and more and more. I mean, there are laws regarding how to foreclose on a unit, and because of the economy the way it is now, they're often ignored. They don't cross their T's, they don't dot their I's. They'll sit back there and foreclose, and they'll foreclose on people who they don't like as opposed to enforcing them uniformly across the board. So yeah, it's one of the areas that we're seeing a lot of claims these days.
Okay. And can you give us an example of architectural violations? What would that be?
Well, the architectural violation is what we said earlier about what happened to the painting situation where people want to paint their houses, people want to build fences, they want to sit back there and add second stories to their homes, and they have to get permission. But what happens is that these boards of directors or these committees, the architectural review committee, will sit back there and not give them approval in a timely manner. So they'll start building second story, they'll start adding, making a taller fence, and what happens is they become in violation. Well, once that thing is started building, it's hard to stop it. But the board of directors has to come in and tell them that you don't have the authority to do what they want to do architecturally. And what happens is that person will sue the board of directors saying they didn't have the right, they were in violation, or they didn't approve my plans in a timely manner.
Okay. And now earlier, Kevin, you spoke about emotional support animals and how that's a trend that you're seeing. People are actually getting certificates saying they can have the emotional support animals. Now, I guess violation of pet policy seems to be another area that's increasing.
Yeah, people seem to really, really enjoy their pets, especially in New York City. They love their pets. The problem is they have a policy in terms of you can have small pets, but you can't have big pets. And you have small pets who end up getting fat and they become bigger pets, and to the point where they might be in violation. Now, whenever they're in violation, what they do is go out and get one of those letters from those doctors and say, this is a pet that we need for emotional reasons, therefore not subject to your pet policy. So we're starting to see more and more of these violations of the pet policy than we've ever seen before because people love their pets.
They do. They definitely love their pets. And then noise complaints. Now that's, what type of noise complaints? Are they indoor, outdoor complaints? What's the trend in that area?
Well, it's coming, it's starting to get warmer out here. In fact, in LA, it's supposed to be 90 degrees this weekend.
Wow.
and what happens is you got more and more people coming outside, and there are certain places that people don't want to hear a lot of noise. So we expect to see a lot more noise complaints than we've seen before. What happens now is that people do complain a lot about the noise, But usually it's about the upstairs neighbor who makes too much noise because he has hardwood floors, or the elevator is making too much noise, or the air conditioning unit makes too much noise. So we see it across the gamut in noise, and we see a lot more noise complaints in areas where they're more concentrated, like New York City. So right now we're seeing a lot of different claims in all these different areas, and they seem to be growing more and more and faster and faster. And we need to kind of sit back and figure out how we're going to handle them a little bit better than we've handled them in the past.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin, for discussing the 10 top claims that you're seeing this year. And I've received a couple of questions via email. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to give you my email address again. It's S like Sam, Branson, BRANSON, at KDINS.com. sbranson at KDINS.com. We'll try to get to everybody's questions. And Kevin, the first question that came in is, what is the #1 reason that claims are declined?
Well, the #1 reason is late reporting of a claim. When I say the definition of a claim is a written demand, most people don't realize that a written demand is a letter that sits back there and tells the board to stop doing something, or else. They wait, the board of directors wait until they get an actual lawsuit, and they submit the lawsuit to the carrier. You cannot do that. As soon as that letter comes in and any kind of demand whatsoever, you must put the carrier on notice, because our #1 area of declination is late reporting of a claim.
Okay. And another question, Kevin, is what major policy exclusions should we be most concerned about?
I would say the #1 exclusion of the D&O is the bodily injury and property damage exclusion. And the reason why, because there is a very, very strong BIPD exclusion in all D&O contracts. And what happens is that the board's responsibility is to manage property. So whenever they don't manage property, it's really a breach of their fiduciary duty. However, it could be a GL claim because it resulted in a bodily injury property damage, because your GL is set up to handle BI and PD type claims. So there are situations where even though they breach of fiduciary duty for not doing something that resulted in BI or PD, it may not be a D&O claim. I do recommend to put everybody on notice, your D&O and your GL, because that way you protect yourself in both situations.
It makes a lot of sense. And Kevin, we have one other question. We have, regarding who is an insured, does the property manager part intend to cover past property managers? She says, I've always assumed yes, but I wanted to check.
That's a good question. It really is going to depend. I would say yes, because we don't name it. I would say the key is, when you look at your D&O policy, is the property manager named on the policy? Because if the property manager's name is on the policy, then it will respond to that property manager only. If it says the property management company, then the likelihood of you having coverage for the past property manager is greater.
Okay, that makes sense. And another question, Kevin, have you seen many claims from lot owners in an association compared to a unit owner?
A lot owners. I would say, and I would define a lot owner as maybe a homeowner, somebody who has a homeowner association versus a condominium association or a co-op. I would say you see different types of claims in a condominium versus a homeowner association. The homeowner association will have more emotional based claims because it's your home and it's your lot. You feel you can do whatever you want to do, but there are certain restrictions in terms of you can have vertical blinds but not have horizontal blinds. You can have a 6-foot fence but not an 8-foot fence. You can have a retaining wall but you can't have a wood. So there's a lot of different rules that applies to HOA versus a condo, but people feel that they can ignore the rules maybe in HOAs more so than condos. So I think that's probably the major difference between the two.
Okay. And then we have a question that's come in regarding emotional support animals. Kevin, regarding the emotional support pet, does the doctor's note automatically override the CC&Rs? What if it's an exotic pet, like a monkey?
You know, I'm not a lawyer, but what will happen is that you will see the lawsuit come in and say that the reason why I have a monkey is because I suffered a loss. This is my grandmother's monkey, and my grandmother had this monkey for the past 15 years. My grandmother passed away, and I need this monkey for therapeutic reasons. At that point in time, the board of directors have to make a decision to say yes or no. If they say no, there will be a lawsuit. And will a judge sit back there and says, you have the right to keep the pet? Only a judge will know. But that's the key thing is that they will be a lawsuit because that monkey is very, very important to that individual, and therefore a lawsuit will ensue, and we'll end up paying about $25,000, which is the average cost of D&O claim these days on these non-monetary damage kind of claims. And remember, our average premium is about $1,500. So, it takes a lot of those $1,500 policies to pay for your $25,000, $30,000 claim.
That makes sense. Well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you to all of our attendees for participating today in our claims webinar. I wanted to mention that we have another webinar coming up in May, on May 16th, and that one will be on our crime policy. And if anybody, I did get one other question that somebody was asking if they could get a copy of today's webinar. Absolutely. Please send me an email to sbranson@kdins.com. Again, that's sbranson@kdins, like insurance.com, Sherry Branson, and I can send you a Windows Media Player file which you can have for your own use. And thank you, Kevin, and thank you to all of the participants today, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Take care.